Alright, my dear subscribers and fellow Celtic fans. Here's your Glasgow Genuine, Celtic Maddie, and Scottish Rebel. Alright, so today I'd love to talk about Battle of Culloden because it's 280 years past the day. So, as you know, the day marks 280 years since the Battle of Culloden. Fought on 16th of April, and the very day, in 1746, at Culloden Moor, near Inverness. So it was the final confrontation of the Jacobite Rising in 1745, where forces led to Charles Edward Stuart, Bonnie Prince Charlie, as we call him, were decisively defeated the British government army led by Duke of Cumberland. The battle lasted less than an hour, but had lasting consequences. In the Jacobite cause, and in the harsh reprisals and cultural suppression in the Scottish Highlands. Today, the battlefield is preserved as a memorial site, commemorating those who fought and died there. So the days mark 280 years past the day since these proud Scotsmen who fought very bravely lost their lives at Culloden Moor. It's nearly 2,000 of them. So today, let's commemorate what they did for Scotland. I'd love to read a wee fragment to you how that day of 16th of April 1746 looked like. Drumasmur, Dawn, Wednesday 16th of April 1746. Dreich is a good Scots word. It means dreary, bleak, and describes perfectly the weather conditions of Drumasmur. A desolate open plain some 6 miles on the east of Inverness. It's very cold. Let night gave away the grudging dawn in the uncertain Scottish spring of 1746. A dry day, but not untypical for the time of year. Leaden skies and low scudding clouds brought freezing cold rain from the northeast. Mist covered the high ground along the ridge of Bainbuchel Moor and Cairn into Churn southwest. Headed north in the waters of Moray Firth, sea sky were almost inseparable to the uniform grey drabness. As for the moor itself, was unremarkable, a flat undulating plain bounded at the east of Valley of River Nairn, with the foothills, Mullanach mountain rising beyond to the south. On a summer's day, with the sun shining, Drumasmur has its charms, but on the wet spring morning, chilled by rain-soaked wind, its desolate and prepossessing place. As contemporary description put it, the external appearance of the country isn't very inviting. It must seem rather wild and romantic to a stranger. One thing was certain, as anyone living in Zoccoli would have remarked, and wasn't a day to be out and about unless there was urgent business in hand. But even at the early hour, despite the discouraging conditions, the moor had been peopled. On its western limits lay on a scratch flat, often boggy open ground called Culloden Moor, across which groups of Usley men were making their way in no particular order to form 2 lines facing north-east. The ground they were occupying across the space of Drumasmur, being bounded on North Parkland to the Culloden House, a gracious Jacobean pile owned by Duncan Forbes, Lord Chief Justice of Scotland, among Presbyterian principles, who was widely admired for his good sense of sagacity. To the south, a ragged lines in another wild enclosure known as Gulavik, on the part of Moor where a hint at human habitation having been built to offer shelter to sheep which used to grazings on the moor in spring and summer. The men who occupied the space were few in number, no more than 5,000. Most of them were hungry, desperately tired, had been involved in grueling and pointless cross-country march, had taken east towards the small neighbourhood town of Nairn before turning back in the grey light of dawn. About half of them, perhaps even fewer, were mountain people, the Highland areas of Scotland, bound together by ties of blood, a name with bred fierce society, and provided the bedrock of one of the feudal societies, 18th century in Europe. The outsiders such men seemed to be adding barbarians who spoke a strange Latin language, a weary class made of animal skins, cords, part wool, but at home their mountain fastness their lords, their servants, existing in closely knit communities ruled by the dynastic chieftain, the man to whom they owed almost loyalty, devotion. This is the book about at the Battle of Culloden, because I've been to Culloden Moor, majestic experience. I have to tell you that. I was so moved. It was even grating. That pain, that sorrow, every droplet of blood is going through your veins, is going through your body. The second you step onto the Culloden Moor, you feel them. You see those brave Scotsmen losing their lives. I'll never forget it. First time at Culloden Moor, man. Alright, now I'd love to move on a wee bit of history of Battle of Culloden before I move on to my speech and my special poem I wrote about after I visited Culloden Moor the first time. So, wee bit of history now. The original Battle of Culloden was the final brutal chapter of the Jacobite Rising of 1745. And understanding what happened comes down, as you know, Rising in 1745, and understanding why it happened comes down to politics, dynastic ambition, and what catastrophic series of decisions. Why Battle of Culloden happened? As it were, I'll tell you this. Culloden was about attempted Charles Edward Stuart to restore his father James Francis Edward Stuart, with the British throne after a glorious revolution removed the Catholic Stuart monarchy. The Protestant House of Hanover took power decades later. Many in the Highlands, some elsewhere, still supported the Stuarts. When Charles landed in Scotland in 1745, he started the Jacobite Rising in 1745. Early success gave a rebellion, bring momentum, Victoria Battle of Prestonpans, marched up in England, but the campaign began to unravel, The Jacobites retreated for England due to lack of support. Supplies, money, and coordination became strained. Government forces were grouped under Prince William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland. By April 1746, the Jacobite army was pure exhausted, man, and their fate, and cornered near Inverness, leading directly to Culloden. So, the ground was boggy, lethal. Scottish Jacobites were exhausted, pure knackered. After a long night march, how are they supposed to fight in the morning? I couldn't understand that. I never understand it. What was the purpose? What was the cause? They just fought that day. The very day. Here's the question, could the Battle of Culloden been avoided? Realistically, aye. Only, earlier in the campaign. By the time both armies were faced at Culloden Moor, the battle was almost inevitable, However, here's a however, several key moments could have changed everything. First one, the retreat for England. Had the Jacobite pushed on toward London, instead of turning back at Derby, they might have forced a political crisis, even negotiation. Second of all, lack of French support. The plan relied heavily on French military backing. That never fully materialised. Without it, the rising was always fragile. Third of all, Culloden Moor, the choice of battlefield. That was the if I tell you this now, if Lord George Murray be a leader of the Battle of Culloden, that would never happen, because he was the best. Lord George Murray was a perfect strategist and tactician. He knew already that battle, that Scotsman, that the Jacobites lose the battle. He already knew the ground, Culloden Moor ground, is lethal, pure boggy. It's no use to fight there. It's a risk. So he would not allow it. But instead, Bonnie Prince Charlie was so stubborn that he has to do it for his father. He promised father and he promised God. So Culloden Moor was disastrously unsuitable for Highland tactics. Flat open ground, boggy, like moorland, almost. Perfect for government, artillery and disciplined infantry. A mere rugged terrain could have played the Jacobite strengths. Fourth, leadership and logistics. As I mentioned already, Lord George Murray. Internal disagreements, poor split lines. There were exhaustion weakened the army long before a first shot was fired. So, could Culloden it have been avoided? Possibly, but April 1746, the reason already collapsing, the battle was mere an end of failed campaign. So then, a standalone mistake. So I give away description of the Battle of Culloden. So on 16th of April, 1746, 208 years from now, ago, the Jacobite army, around 5,000 men, formed at the bleak, boggy expanse Culloden Moor near Inverness. Facing them was a larger, well-fed, better equipped government force, roughly 9,000 under Cumberland. And I do another thing. The Cumberland celebrated his 25th birthday on the 15th of April at the Camden River Nairn. So that means that they were well fed and better equipped, and they rested. The battle itself was shockingly short, around an hour, even less than an hour. Some say 40 minutes, not even 40 minutes ahead somewhere in one source. The government artillery opened fire, tearing through Jacobite lines. The Highlanders, first of all, desperate and exposed, launched their famous charge. Then, but the ground, obviously the ground, slowed them. Disciplined musket volleys cut them down. When they finally reached the government lines, they were met bayonets in a coordinated defensive drill. The Jacobite line collapsed quickly. The fall was just no defeat but devastation. After battle, Cumberland's troops carried brutal reprisals across the Highlands, effectively crushing the clan system and the Jacobite cause for good. Let me tell you this. Culloden wasn't just a battle. It was the end of way of life. Culloden marks the end, as said that Culloden marks the end of the Highland way of life, a clan system, and Scottish Gaelic kills are forbidden since that time. After the Battle of Culloden, it happened because both fragile rebellion ran out of time, supporting options, and had different choices rather. Earlier they might have changed the story. But a time at armies met on day called April morning. The outcome was tragically close to inevitable. And why I think Culloden was the army of the dead, the army of the dead. How? Some historians define Culloden as the army of the dead. How that is. Because of something unique to Klansmen that happened that day. What the Gaels called Bull Arches. Literally myth history. Something that wasn't it written down when something decided to fight in April 1746. The ground was a huge issue. That was the main issue one, the ground. It wasn't properly settled. There was also an idea that the Jacobite army, knowing the Duke of Cumberland's forces were approaching, essentially, for here for Aberdeen. For the east, I would match the Nairn and surprise them in their camp, That was, of course. But it didn't work. It was also fishing down, raining, and they were very, very short of supplies now. And so the Jacobite army during Culloden at Drumasmur, they essentially stood as they always did in the clan groups. As I say, there were family armies that the government army march on the field like their standards snapping in the wind and they're twiddling their drums. And their sergeant majors and the shouting and men look to your fronts, with us on. They hear something coming across the battlefield and around 400, 500 now. Yeah, so they're not close. But here I would think are psalms being sung. Soldiers often did that fair battle because they were going to be closer now. But they're good man at the end of the day. But the ground was disastrally bad and still very boggy. If you go to National Trust for Scotland site, and I have to tell you that it's a wee surprise with curiosity that I'm since last week. I'm a member of pure proud and happy member of the National Trust for Scotland. I'm so proud that I can support Scotland, merciful Scotland, because for Scotland I do everything. I stand by Scotland to the very end. I'm proud that I can support Scotland's heritage, culture and history. I'm so proud of it. So you will see it. Pools of water at Culloden, No use for fighting at all. It's for the clans to slow into each other, man. So they were never able to form the wedges properly, The government army was much more disciplined this time. They got a lot of colonnade, and in fact that is what made the Assel Bridge charge. They fired what they called canister shot, called grape shot, which one government officer said. Ploughed lanes through the clansmen. It was devastating. Now, here's to you, a brave Scotsman who fought bravely that day, 280 years ago. Let's commemorate them in my wee short speech I prepared, especially for them. To commemorate their bravery and the courage, the valour of their hearts. So, I stand here today, and I feel a bit not even find the words. I feel in the air, in the hush, it seemed to fall so gently and so heavily upon this sacred ground of Culloden. I feel it in my chest tight. And aching, if the past itself is reaching out, it isn't to be forgotten. It isn't to be buried beneath the passing of time. Because the day isn't just a date. We remember the 16th of April, 1746. The day the moor at Culloden was soaked just with rain and mud, with the blood of Scotland's sons. The day the dream of people was shattered beneath the weight of iron, fire, merciless ambition during the Battle of Culloden. It is 16th of April, 1746, the day of the Battle of Culloden. And even now, 280 years on, I can't speak it as something distant, or detached. I can't wrap it neatly in history and place it upon a shelf. No. I feel far so deeply for that. As its memory, its pain. So it's something that still lingers in the air, in the hearts. And so in the silence that falls over that field. When the wind dies down and the world seems to hold its breath. I carry them. Those men, those true Scotsmen, who stood upon this very moor, not as figures in a story, but living, breathing souls, with hopes, with fears, with loved ones left behind, with a fire, that valour in their hearts, that no force on this earth could ever truly extinguish. And I think of them again and again to him. I picture them as a dawn broke. A Culloden are forgiven over the field. So the damp clinging to their skin, the hunger known at their bodies, the exhaustion etched into their bones. They weren't an army of polished perfection. They were something far more human, far more real. And yet they stood. God, they stood. And ask myself, what does that kind of courage come from? What is it that makes a man already won and weary lift his head, tighten its grip, and step forward in the storm of iron fire that awaited him? It isn't madness. It is belief. It is love of something greater than oneself. It is Scotland. And I feel a lump of rice in my throat when I allow myself to truly see it. Not as a tale, but as a moment. The thunder of cannon, the smoke of thick and choking. The cries, they're all desperate. Tearing through the air as a hailing charge began, not just tactic and just defiant roar against the tide. I saw the swallow them whole. They charged into death, aye, but they also charged into history, into immortality. Because in that moment, they became more than men. They became a symbol of spirit that utterly refuses to bow. And yet the cruelty of that day lingers just as strongly, if it's not more so, because it didn't end with a clash of steel of full of bodies upon the heather. No, it spread beyond, into something colder, into far more merciless. The wounded left where they fell. The hunted driven across the glens like shadows to be erased. A people stripped, not only of life but an identity. Their tartan forbidden, their language silenced, their very soul targeted as if they were something dangerous. And I stand here and feel anger rise within me, slow and burning, because it wasn't enough to defeat them on that field. They sought to break them entirely, to erase them. But here we are. Here I stand at Culloden Moor today, 280 years later. And here you stand, and Scotland still stands. Because I feel that still, I feel them in a very gust of wind that sweeps across Culloden, as if carries whispers of their names. I feel them in a stillness that follows heavy, sacred and flow land itself refuse to forget the weight of what it holds. I feel them in me. In my voice that's speaking, and my heart is a faster and very word, and a tears and a threat, and I allow myself to truly grasp the magnitude of sacrifice. They weren't perfect. They weren't invincible. They were men. And that makes all men powerful. Because despite their humanity, despite their fear, despite the odds stood against them like unbreakable, well, they chose to stand, to fight, to believe. And that, and I can't help but ask myself, would I have done the same? Would any of us? I want to believe they would. I need to believe I would. Because their legacy demands something of us. Ask us not to simply remember, but to feel to carry, to honour it in a way that goes beyond words spoken on a single day. Remembrance isn't passive. It isn't an act of defiance. It's a refusal to let their story be softened, diluted, or forgotten. So, on the 280th anniversary, I don't stand here quietly. I stand here all of it, with the grief, the pride, the anger, the love, all tangled together, all burning within me like a flame that willingly got out. I mourned them deeply, painfully, but also honoured them fiercely and apologetically, because they deserved more than silence. They deserved to be remembered as they were, brave, flawed, human, and utterly heartbreakingly magnificent in their final stand. And I make their promise not lightly, not empty words carried away by the wind. I will remember. I will speak of them. I will carry their story, their spirit, the fire and valour, in my voice, in my writing, in every breath that I take when I think of Scotland. And that's what it means to belong to something so deeply rooted in sacrifice and resilience, because they are not gone. They're not woven into the very fabric of this land, into the marrow of those who refuse to forget, and the quiet strength that still defines Scotland to this day. As long as I have my voice, as long as my heart beats with this fierce, stubborn love for this bonny, special country called Scotland, they will live on forever. Alba Gubrath. So I have to tell you, I already tell you what I felt wandering through Culloden Moor that day. I felt a gust of wind, pure strong gust of wind on Culloden Moor. And then that pure silence. And then I knelt down, I knelt down at every gravestone of clan in silence, thanking them for fighting so bravely for Scotland. And I have to tell you that when I knelt down at Clan Fraser gravestone, I felt like Claire. She was Culloden Moor. When she thought Jamie Fraser died, and she was just telling him the story, telling him about what happened in her life. As she still remembers him, she still loves him. That I felt like Claire kneeling down at Clan Fraser gravestone and putting there a wee wreath of heather. I felt it, and also I felt it deeply, so deeply in my heart. As I wrote a poem. This is my special poem I wrote after a visit at Culloden Moor. Culloden Moor. You seen horror on 16th of April 1746. Culloden Moor. You seen far so many lives of brave Highlanders taken away. Culloden Moor. You covered with millions of blood droplets of brave Scotsmen who fought that day, very bravely trying to send the Cameron's forces straight to hell. Culloden Moor. You see too many Highlanders slaughtered that day. You seen those sweat, tears, devotion just to make Scotland free again. Culloden Moor. Flat, boggy, lethal. I'm asking you, that was necessary. You've taken almost 2,000 brave Scotsmen away. Culloden Moor. When I saw you that day, my heart was so broken, so my eyes packed with tears, and that sadness filled my wee body. Culloden Moor. I can still see these swords, brave Highlanders, covered with blood. I can still see you dropping like flies, being shot one by one by Cameron's army, and I simply greed. Culloden Moor. You're so murky, filled with blood, tears, sorrow. They'll tear me apart in every step that I take. Culloden Moor. I'm stepping on your grounds, covered by sublime clock and purple heather. I can see the nonsense of the battle. I can see these lives of Scotsmen wasted unnecessarily. Culloden Moor. While I'm stepping on your grounds, I can smell dust, smoke, salty taste of sweat and tears. Culloden Moor. I just love sitting on your rusty purple clock in pure silence, saying nothing, Raisin toast of finest malt for use, my brave Scotsmen. And oh God, I love you, Scotland. Mer. So I raise my toast of the finest malt for those brave Scotsmen. Fought very bravely. I lost their lives at Culloden 280 years ago. Here's to us. Here's to us as a wee memory I prepared. Culloden. It's a wee heather. Here's for you. It's my symbol. I'm faithful. I remember. Just rest in peace. Brave Highlanders. Brave Scotsmen. Our blood is still our fathers, and ours, the valor, their hearts.